Welcome to the C'est La Vie podcast, episode 4. I'm so excited. Why has it been snowing lately? So much is going on. Some good things, some bad things. We'll get into all of that. But I wanted to start this podcast off by announcing to everyone that in 1 week's time we have the C'est La Vie lunch launch. And that's going to be an action-packed hour of performances from artists around this province and speakers from community organizations that are making waves and making the world better for English-speaking youth across this province every single day. I have really been enjoying having these conversations with people around the community, and in a lot of ways it's inspired me and made me want to get involved in different ways that I didn't even think were possible. So as much as I can, I'd love to present you guys with these great people and have you get to know their story. Have you get to know some of the amazing work that's being done around the province. I think you guys are going to love it. But today I am joined by Milla, a good friend of mine, and Milla does some really interesting work around the province by having conversations with students and unions as well as guidance counselors from different CEGEPs and universities around the province. These conversations help us get a better idea of exactly how this new online learning is really affecting the way our generation is going to function for years to come. When this pandemic began in Quebec, teachers and schools had a week to adapt to this immediate shift to online learning. The government allocated hundreds of millions of dollars to support learning throughout the pandemic, and the Minister of Higher Education urged schools to speak with their students. Now, with all of this urgency, it will be interesting to see how these measures actually came into play and how this integrated online learning is affecting our generation. We have a pretty extensive conversation about a variety of things, so that's super interesting. And we're also going to be hearing some music from the Chris George Project, a classic 60s inspired rock band here in Montreal, and I think you guys are going to love it. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you guys to my co-star of the day, Milla. Milla, please introduce the world to who you are and the wonderful work you do at Y4Y.
I've been an intern at Y4Y since September last year. I'm currently a student at Concordia and I am doing my major in political science. So I was doing an intern with the objective of learning what political science will bring me in the future, what I can do with political science after I graduate. So I ended up at Y4Y and I did a series of consultations with post-secondary students about their situation during COVID because we've been in lockdown for the last year. So after a year, I imagine that people have made a lot of conclusions about what they need, what they don't need, what the government has done right, what the government has done wrong, as well as their educational institution.
I looked at the kind of work that you did and it almost made me jealous as a psychology student, looking at the fact that you got to have all these cool conversations. I had the privilege to join Milla on some of these consultations where we talked to different schools and we had different conversations with different groups of students, and we asked them particularly about this idea of COVID and how it has affected them and their livelihood.
I only did these consultations just to prove the point and really learn what they're going through, because if you want to advocate for people in that age group, you gotta know what they're going through.
So let's just jump right into the juice. What was the number one issue that we heard consistently throughout all of these meetings that students were facing?
I think that the main issue that probably 100% of the schools said that it was a problem is difficulty to stay motivated. So that can range from a number of causes. That can come from either mental health problems or accessibility problems, or honestly a lot of problems can be the background of this, but the main issue was lack of motivation. And then lack of motivation caused many other problems too.
I had a conversation with someone that I used to roll with at jiu-jitsu who said to me that university will be the best experience of your life. If you liked CEGEP, university is going to be you're going to be surrounded by so many like-minded people and focused towards exactly what you want to achieve, and you're going to find all these cool projects. And what's sad is that we had like 1 semester to taste how everything was, and then it just was completely taken away,
Yeah, and I think that the experiences change depending on what year you're in. So I heard a lot about how first year students have no idea what the experience at university is, and then how you have a big preparation in CEGEP and everyone's like, well, when you go to university, everything is going to change and you're going to love university and you're going to have such a good time because you're going to meet so many people and you can talk to the teachers and you're going to have this whole experience. And then the first year students had none of it. They've never stepped foot in university or even in their CEGEPs. when you're coming from high school and then you're preparing yourself to go into CEGEP and you've never been there a year after and you're almost graduating, you're halfway through your program. So the first year students had a big problem with that because you have no connection to your university or CEGEP. You have no sense of belonging, you have no sense of community because you don't know who your peers are, you don't know who your teachers are. Sometimes all you see is black squares on your screen because no one turns their camera on.
I definitely think that there's like this weird disconnect. Like people don't understand how easy it is to just not go to a class. And I'm not saying that this is something people should be doing, but I'm saying it's something we've seen time and time again. And all these students are having these same experiences coming back to us with the same answer, that it's just easy to not go to class. It's easy to not put an effort because being online facilitates everything. It facilitates just, you could leave your camera off, you could just leave your volume down and then do whatever you want.
Yeah, for
No
sure.
one's stopping you.
A lot of students said that it's really hard to get ready for class if you just go to class in your bed. Like you have an 8:30 a.m. class. It's not even about the time. If you have a 2 p.m. class, like you study in your room, you sleep in your room, you do everything in your room. So to keep study and home life separated is very hard because you can just roll out of bed and then you're in class. You don't have to commute to class. You don't have to get ready. You don't have to have breakfast. You just go right into class and sometimes you're still in bed. So it's so easy to turn your camera off and just listen to it as if it's a podcast and you have no interaction with the teacher or with the students.
Mm-hmm. It feels almost like this dystopian future.
Another problem that came up is job insecurity and economic insecurity. So even though some students studied and work at the same time, a lot of hours got cut, which means that students are at home 24/7 for a most part of them. So you stay at home for most of your day, most of your nights, and people just can't wait to go back to their social lives because that's a big part of CEGEP and university.
Mm-hmm. And also, like, how important is that routine, right? Like waking up to go somewhere every day, that commute, that's an important part of having that motivation to do these things. You touched on a bit like the fact that we're in our rooms all day, all night, just kind of, this is where we study, this is where we sleep. And for a lot of people, some people don't have the safest environments at home, so that's their only escape, and they're locked in the confines of that room. And that's one of the things we heard a lot of people say, is that they wish through this whole time there was some sort of integrated way that the CEGEPs or universities could have provided to keep the students engaged with each other, like some sort of online events. So it'll be interesting to see how people adapt to that weirdly integrated social life that's coming next fall.
Some people say that they don't believe that it will go back to normal. Like people have been this way for so long that they just got used to it. But I think people will just go back to as it was before. No problem. Because I remember students complaining about how it's hard to keep motivated to go to these online events, even though there's CEGEPs and universities organize like online parties or like online forms of socialization, but you already stay on Zoom and like looking at a screen all day long. So sometimes you don't want to go to an extra event because you don't want to look at your computer anymore.
I kind of have this vision that like once everything is open up again, like we can all go downtown and everyone's going to be on the streets. There's going to be like those street fairs with like food trucks and like it's just going to be flooded with people. There's going to be music playing, and I could just imagine those summer days.
I can imagine it. If you go to the parks right now, you can already see it. Even though everyone's distanced, you see everyone at the park. It's 15 degrees and sunny, and people are like wearing bikinis at the park, and they're having the time of their lives, even though they can't see that many people at the same time. So I think things will go back to like big groups of people, and people will feel even better to be there because they haven't done it for so long.
All this reminiscing about what will one day be brings us to the sheer reality. I just had to cancel my backpacking trip that I had set for June. It was a long time coming. I kind of saw it coming. I kind of, a few months ago, I realized like there's no way we're gonna get both our shots by now. Like the second they said like, okay, Quebec is making it so that there was that kind of distance between the time you got your second dose. I was like, there's no way we're going to get both and be able to travel.
Yeah, people are frustrated for many reasons, and it just overwhelms students. What I saw in many of the consultations is that people are overwhelmed, even though they feel like at the same time, they feel like they're not doing enough and they have too much to do. So even though you're doing everything that you have to do, you still feel like you should be doing more. And the amount of things that you are doing is too much to handle. So it's complicated because it can come from so many occasions. Like, people feel frustrated because they're always at home. Some students feel frustrated because they see in the media that the guilt is being put on youth for spreading the virus, even though when you see statistics, most of the cases come from work. So people who go back to work or school, and then they get it from there. But when you see ads for like the spreading of the virus, it's always young people who are like at illegal parties or something like that. So I heard a lot of students complaining about they feel like they're being guilted for it, even though they're the ones who's staying at home all the time. I think that accessibility came up in a lot of consultations, not all of them. I think that the CEGEPs in universities that have either a lot of students who live in rural areas or students who are international, then accessibility becomes a problem, either because classes are synchronous and then they can't go to class at like 4 a.m. because they're in another country, another continent, or people who live in areas where internet access isn't as good, or maybe they don't have a personal computer, or maybe they don't have a quiet space at home to study, and then they can't go to class.
It's so unfortunate because in so many ways these issues can be fixed, and I know a lot of students were saying that their teachers were really adapting to the times, but I know of this prof at Concordia who has a 8:30 to 10:30 time slot at night, okay, and he so strongly was anti-posting recordings online, anti-posting any notes, any slides. He had one Moodle page for the entire semester, and he only posted the course outline 4 weeks during the semester because his philosophy has always been you have to come to class to see everything. Now, when things are in person, I can understand like how that works. But for so many people now, that's just not a possibility. It's not reasonable to not adapt to the times. And though there's a lot of people correctly doing so, it's sad to see that, some people fall through the cracks and some people have to really suffer for these things. Because a credit is a credit. And
yeah, I think that a lot of the students complained about the relationship with the teachers too. Although most of them said that the teachers are being pretty flexible and they're adapting to things, some teachers are still like the teacher you just talked about. They're like, no, this is how I've been doing for the past 50 years, so this is how I'm going to keep doing it. But if all the students are having to adapt to it, then teachers have to be accountable for adapting themselves too. Because you've been doing this for the past 20 years, we're in different times now, and this is a special situation. You have to be able to adapt to the online learning method. I know that asynchronous classes aren't always the best option. There's pretty much a divide between people who like asynchronous classes and people who like synchronous classes, because it's easy to just push your recording to the side and be like, oh, I can just listen to this class tomorrow, or next week, or next month. And then finals come and you have like 10 recordings to listen to and you don't have time to study for everything. So I understand that it's harder to organize classes when it's just a bunch of recordings. But at the same time, not everyone can be in a synchronous class at the same time.
One of the things I've learned, to your point, through all the conversations we have, is there's such a big disconnect between people's, I think, sympathy for others. Right now, through a lot of the conversations we were having, a lot of people were really thinking about how things were affecting them. If we're thinking to the protests that are happening, a lot of these people are thinking about the struggle and the inconveniences that are being brought upon themselves. So many communities are dealing with these individual struggles, and everybody feels like they're not being heard.
Yeah.
And you can't help everyone at once. So a lot of people feel neglected right now. A lot of people feel like their problems aren't being answered. And it's just sad to see that after a year of being like sticking through this, we're starting to see cracks in the foundations of what's been keeping us all together. And I really hope that in the coming weeks, things start to resolve in that aspect.
Yeah, I understand, especially for teachers. My sister goes to high school and she still goes to class once every 2 days. And they have 2 different classes. So whenever she's not going to presential classes, she's having online classes. So teachers are there every day, exposed to students. And we know that the students, because they're from high schools, they're not old enough to be severely affected by the virus, but we know that teachers are, and they're a risk group maybe, and they're in contact with people every day, so it makes sense that they feel that way. And I understand for teachers and CJEPs and universities too, sometimes they've been doing that for so long. And then in a week, you have to learn a whole new platform. You have to learn how to use Zoom. You have to learn how to use Moodle. You have to learn so many things at the same time. And the university hasn't provided training. That's something that has been brought up in the consultations too. Although students are not happy about the way the teachers are dealing with this, sometimes it's not their fault. Universities have the resources to teach all the teachers how to use their platforms and how to use whatever navigation platform that they need to use to teach students. So of course it's not nice to be dealing with teachers who are not adapting, but it's not always their faults. They are learning at the same time.
Because the thing is, we are in a pandemic. We are in sort of this apocalyptic future, dystopian kind of future. And I found out, I was talking to one of my sociology friends yesterday, and she told me that there's a lot of different types of generations, like categories for generations. And we actually fall in something called the Katniss Generation, which is a generation that grew up on dystopian media, dystopian novels, dystopian television, dystopian movies. And it's true. I grew up on a lot of movies that talked about an apocalyptic dystopian future. And to think about it now, like as the dystopian generation, we're kind of at the brunt of dealing with struggles with this kind of weird sort of dystopian future we're living in. Because we're in a pandemic. I haven't been able to go outside and be able to just walk around downtown in a year.
It is weird because it's nothing like the movies. Like, it's nothing like the books. It's nothing like the movies. No one predicted this. Like, you know that in Brazil, even Bolsonaro is promoting fake, like, COVID kits. And then a bunch of people died from the COVID kits because they got COVID and they thought that it was going to cure them, and then they take it and they die because it's not proven to be effective. It's just like the president thinks it's fine, and he probably has some like deal with whoever sells them, and then he promotes it and people take it and they die, of course.
That's ridiculous. And obviously, like, the riots, these are horrible things that are happening, but they're cracks in the foundation that we're starting to see now after a year. But for a year, I feel like we've been really strong here. Like, we haven't seen this kind of, and I'm just hoping that, in this final stretch, we can all just kind of band together and pull our way through. We're almost at the end, guys. We're all going to be vaccinated soon. We're all going to be partying in the streets of Montreal. It's going to be fun. We're going to be able to go to Osheaga next summer, hopefully. But we just have to get through this final stretch. Stay strong like we have been as a community. I think we can do it. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Yeah. But it's so long too, like the amount of time that we've been like this. And I feel like either me, I don't know about your situation, but I have an ideal situation where like I have a nice home and I have a good relationship with my parents and I have like the opportunity to get out of my house because I work and I have like a good situation for myself and I'm still struggling. So imagine the people who do not have ideal situations. Like, I have nothing to complain about my situation and I still think it's hard. So people who have any inconvenience, of course they're not going to deal with it in the best way because they're not in the best situation and there's nothing they can do about it, which can be very hard.
If you have environments that are not healthy at home, it's extremely hard to get that sort of release, especially with these curfews. And I understand the arguments on both sides for curfew, but being able to go for those night walks, that's something people just need sometimes. And just even that little bit of escape, I can understand how this makes it more difficult. And those people feel more isolated and pushed aside for it,
Yes, for sure. I participated in a consultation with academic advisors. And then they were talking about how many students who do not have ideal situations at home, they either have a bad relationship with their parent or like any sort of problem at home where they do not have a good situation where they live. And going to CJEP and going to university is their escape. That's where they go to be themselves. That's where they go to meet everyone they know. That's where they go to truly do what they feel like doing instead of being so limited at home. So once these students are trapped at home, they truly feel trapped at home because they can't be themselves and they can't do the things that they would usually do with the people they would usually do. Even though many institutions have a psychology part of it where students can go and they have psychological help when they need, the workers are overbooked, overworked, like overloaded. There's not enough professionals. So according to the fall semester of last year, comparing to this year, there was a 51% increase in people who had mental health related issues. And then from those people who have developed those issues, 77% did not seek help because it's either too expensive or too time consuming. And what a lot of the students during the consultation said about mental health is that it's very hard to get help because there's so much bureaucracy in the system that you either have to wait an year and a half to get a therapist, or you pay a lot of money to have one now and you might not even find one that's ideal for you. So a lot of people were complaining about how hard it is to get help and how the situation has made mental health issues increase. So sometimes if you have like a large amount of anxiety problems or depression, it's going to be hard for you to seek help on your own, especially if the system has made it so difficult for you to find a therapist. If you have to go through so many phone calls, so many emails, so many like exchanges that might not give you anything in return. So if you have any sort of problem, of course, that's going to be harder for you.
One of the things that we talked about throughout this podcast is this idea that there's a lot of frustration going on and there's a lot of resentment and a lot of feelings of neglect, but that isn't a reason to act out in acts of violence, especially towards
small businesses,
towards small businesses. Your frustrations are towards people that have the power to allow you to go outside. The fact that you're harming businesses that have struggled and have been hit as hard as you have been, they're struggling just as much. And I've heard that people in Montreal had to pay up to like $15,000 to repair their windows in their shops because of the damage that went through.
Sometimes, like, of course, insurance covers it, but if you get your window smashed, your insurance is gonna double, triple, quadruple.
It's so sad that it's something that it came to, you know?
Yeah, because people, they have nothing to do with it, and they're being as affected as you.
I'm not opposed to people standing up for what they think is right. This is not a valid response in any way to what people are feeling right now.
Yeah.
We're all feeling isolated. We're all feeling stuck. We're all feeling confined. But that doesn't give us the right to harm anybody else.
I'm all for manifesting. If you have to go and manifest because of something that's going on with your community, I'm all for it. But you got to think about the consequences on other people. And most of the times, during these times, these other people have nothing to do with the problems you're going through. They're probably going through the same things. So if you're going to do that, you got to think about the consequences.
I hope with these new vaccine rollouts and with everything going smoothly, I hope we can continue with this sympathetic approach to each other and understand that everybody's going through struggles, some that you can't even begin to fathom how deep they are. So if we could approach each other with that bit of sympathy, and for this final stretch of this pandemic, you know, stay safe for everyone's sake, then hopefully we can get back to seeing each other and doing all the great things we love doing. Thank you, Milla, for being a part of this conversation and talking about some of your work. I'm really excited to read the final report.
Thank you so much for having me. I think we covered everything that I wanted to talk about. That's it. Stay home, and if you can, stay safe.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Milla.
And with that comes an end to our podcast. But the conversation isn't over just yet. In 1 week's time, we will be releasing not only the launch event, but we will also be releasing episode 5, which comes out with a great conversation with the head of the MCDC, an organization that helps a lot in the Mégantic area of Quebec. And we're going to talk to them a bit about how COVID has affected their community in their isolated regions. We will also be deepening the conversation by providing you with some solutions and things you guys can do in your own communities to stay involved, stay connected, and not feel so isolated through the final stretch of this pandemic while keeping everyone in your community safe. As much as I'm looking forward to that, I want to ask you, have there been any issues that you feel need to be discussed and that you think more awareness needs to be raised for? Reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you guys. I'd love to hear what is going on in your communities. You can find all the links to where to do that in the description of wherever you're watching this podcast, where you can also find a link as to where to vote on what dish I will be cooking for the launch event. Click on the link below and vote for your favorite ones, and I will cook whatever you guys choose throughout the entire event. Till next time, stay safe. Remember, you are the culture. We are the culture. So go out there, keep your voices heard, and let's keep building upon this ever-changing mosaic that is the Quebec identity.
Hey, you, sitting by the street, you got nothing to eat. He said he didn't need, so I said, just take it, but don't waste it. I got a world to feed. got something you need. Whoa, yeah, it is a hug. Here's a little love.
This episode goes out to all of you wonderful people that have sacrificed so much for this pandemic, for keeping your communities safe. We're in the final stretch. I believe in us. I believe that we can get through this. I want to thank Canadian Heritage for supporting this project, and special thanks to the Upford Network for helping with its editing. Another thank you to the Chris George Project for having their wonderful music featured. The Sound of Change is an incredible song, and you can find links to it also in the description below. I've compiled a small list of small businesses that were affected by the riots in Montreal, so you can check them out and go and support them however you can. And thank you to all of you for giving this podcast a listen and keeping these voices heard. Have a great day and stay safe.